Good morning, folks. Welcome back. We are going to talk about Word of Command today. It's an alpha card that we picked up recently. We are putting it into our Alpha 40 deck. We play tested it with our friend Mike and actually played it wrong in one of the games, totally incorrectly, just didn't read the words too carefully. So we'll take a look at that. He also mentioned that there was an article that he read, which was an interview with Jesper Meerfors, one of the original art directors of Magic the Gathering back in '93, in which he was talking about Word of Command in the article. So we found the article. I'll put the link to this article in the description. So if you want to read about Word of Command and the full interview with Jesper Meerfors, it's there too. But this is going to basically talk about this particular card. I also, in playing some of my matches last month in December, I was talking to some of my opponents about the card who've played it before. And it's a very sensitive card because it can be, there's some like bad feelings that come from the card if it's played incorrectly or at the wrong time. The text of the card, just so you remember, it costs 2 black to cast as an instant. You may look at opponent's hand and choose any card opponent can legally play using mana from his or her mana pool or lands. Opponent must play this card immediately. You make all the decisions it calls for. This spell may not be countered after you have looked at opponent's hands. So there's some strategy involved with when you play it. At the very least, it lets you look at their hand if it resolves. And if you have any cards that they could play with mana available to them, then you can get those cards out of those hand and potentially not be a threat to you. So that's Word of Command. When Jesper was asked about Word of Command, in this article, this article was particularly talking about what happened immediately after the success of Alpha happened, and they released Arabian Nights. And Jesper mentioned that there was this idea that Arabian Nights and Ice Age would be standalone sets, and the backs of the cards would look different than Alpha Beta Magic cards. But ultimately, that idea was countered, and so they just went with the regular Magic backs for all the cards, so they could be interchanged pretty easily into decks. And then when he was asked about some of his art preferences and things back in the day, they asked him, he mentioned that he liked Demonic Hordes. He liked that card. The influence on that card was Scandinavian fairy tales and Aboriginal art. And then the interviewer asked, what about Word of Command? And so Jesper responded, oh God, that card, that's a card that will haunt me. I really dislike it. I know there are people who do like it and don't mean to denigrate them. And it's a fun card to alter because there's nothing to it. But what happened was I was doing a texture painting. It was in the big bag that he carries around, and he showed it to Richard. That'd be Richard Garfield. And so this was probably back in 92, 93, before the sets was printed. He told Richard he was thinking of using it as a background, and he had drawn 2 stupid little eyes on it as a joke, which you can see there. And that's when he said that he really liked it, and he had a card for it. So he thought about putting that image on this card that lets you look at your opponent's hand and cast a card from their hand. Jesper thought that Richard was kidding, but he insisted it was perfect for it. So it was never painted to be a Magic card, and I'm not trying to pass it off as a legitimate painting. I mean, it might be a legitimate painting now, but one thing that Jesper noticed as an artist and as he's gotten older is that he doesn't see his work the other way people see it. he doesn't see his work the way other people see it. So maybe people see something in it but he doesn't. There's not much to it really. It's just kind of a dark landscape painting with these two little eyes on it. This card is in fairly played condition, so what you see is probably just surface wear on the card. But it's really like a brownish black swamp area looking kind of. I can't even see any details on the card. It's really just kind of a wash of colors with these two little white eyes that are peeking through that background painting. Jesper did do a lot of lands and landscape paintings. Like if you recall, he did Tropical Island, Tundra, and a few of those other dual lands. Those were all Jesper Mirfors. But that's the article. I will link it into the description of this video, so if you want to read the full article, by all means go ahead and support Jesper in his history of art directing Magic the Gathering. And I will also put this Word of Command into my blue-black Venom Vice deck, and be kind of careful when I play it. It is an instant, and so I'm feeling like, from my conversations with my other friends and players, there's some trickery involved. Like, so if you cast it but don't tell your opponent what you're playing, they may not know how to respond to it. So it is an instant, like I said, so you can play it on your turn or their turn. I do feel like the best time to play it might be on their turn after they untap, so they have so you would have access to all of their lands and mana in their pool, and then potentially after they draw their card, because then you can see more cards in their hand. But there's also a period in Alpha Magic in the rule book where when a player draws their card, they can go into their attack phase next, and then once a player declares attack in Alpha, the other opponent can't really cast instants. They have to do like assign damage and deal with blockers. So there's a term that's kind of called draw attack, which I've heard used in Alpha 40 before, where like if it's your turn, you untap, you do your upkeep, and then you draw a card and you quick declare attack so that your opponent can't cast anything while it's your turn, and you sort of have priority. Priority wasn't really established until later in Magic's rule history, but in Alpha there was sort of like this, gentleman's type thing where it's your turn, you untap your cards, you draw, then you can go into attack, and then they can't, counterspell things or play Word of Command, for example. The other thing I would think would be helpful when I play this is I'll just tap 2 black or tap a swamp for Dark Ritual and then cast Word of Command and tell my opponent I'm playing Word of Command as an instant. How would you like to respond to Word of Command? They can respond by counterspelling it. They could respond by lightning bolting me, getting some cards out of their hand and tapping a mana land on their side, so that if Word of Command resolves, let's say they don't have a counterspell, but if Word of Command resolves, they would have 1 less card in their hand and 1 less mana land available for me to use, and then I would look at their hand and see what's left in their hand and try to cast something. But at the very least, I'd get to see what they're playing. I'd get to find out if they have any counterspells in their hand that they could use to counterspell Time Twister. And if they don't, I think that this card would be helpful. I could use it as a way to set up the Time Twister and then cast Time Twister, drop some Black Vices, and then do damage on their upkeep. There is one question about the timing, because it says that this card may not be countered after you've looked at your opponent's hand. So if I cast Word of Command and look at their hand and they're playing blue, is it possible to tap 2 of their blue islands to cast Counterspell and counterspell the word of command. Some people think it's possible. Some people don't think it's possible because the card specifically says it can't be countered. But it, you know, I would be casting the counterspell and not the opponent. So that's kind of a tricky one. I don't think you can really like force the issue. If you were to come up in a league game, you'd have to be kind of sensitive about how you define the outcome of cards like that. But I think I will try to kind of play with it and see if there's an ideal situation where it's useful or when it's not useful. Certainly I could use it on my turn. If they were playing Black Vice and I want to get under the Vices, I could cast it, and you know, if the card got countered or didn't do anything, it would still just get a card out of my hand. And if I was playing Throne of Bone, like I think I will, when I tap black for Dark Ritual, I'll have 3 black. I'll use 2 for the Word of Command, plus the 3rd black mana from Dark Ritual I'll use to just gain a life. So if anything, I would basically cast Word of Command, gain a life, may or may not be able to see the cards in their hand, and may or may not be able to cast a card from their hand. So I'll give it a ride. I'll see what happens. I'll put some of the games on the channel, so if you want to subscribe to the channel, you'll get a notification when those matches go live. And I'll also do some deck techs with it, so you get to learn when the best times are to play Word of Command and when the best times are not to play it. So I appreciate everybody for watching. I thank you for the support and the follows and all the comments. And hope you have a great month playing Magic and Alpha 40 if that's your format. Take care. I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.